And I think that, there you go. Got it. Next slide, please. There it is, the agenda. We're gonna have opening remarks by our state conservationist, Juan Hernandez. Amber Till will give an update on the financial assistance programs from NRCS. Nathan Fickard will be providing this update on ecological sciences. Denise Liggett on partnerships and initiatives. Kaylee Pate on local working group activities from the point of the Association of Florida Conservation Districts. I will be presenting along with my colleagues, Sarah May and Michael Bush, an update on easements. And we'll have some various partner reports afterwards. And again, we'll have a closing remarks by Juan Hernandez. Okay, so with that, I think the next piece is Juan Hernandez.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to be here with us today. Much appreciate your time and folks online as well. So I can see how many, we have 36 people online. So thank you all for joining us well online. What I wanted to bring, so we are making a lot of changes, as you can imagine. Actually, this morning I made a point that staffing wise, I just find out yesterday, because we have been hiring people here and there and whatnot. I just find out that our official number is 148 full-time permanent employees. And I took the state with 125, 126. So, and we still have about 10 vacancies that hopefully I will be able to fill behind. The market is so difficult to get people running, and we tried to get a realty specialist and we got 10 applicants and we did not got even a single job offer. So it happens. This is what we're facing, and that is just one example. I have been actually visiting with many of the industries, trying to expand our customer base. Very important to us, very important. We finalized the wildlife strategy, for example, and now we're engaging into what would be the outreach component of the wildlife strategy. And we did it by phases. And Nathan did discuss this on the prior meeting that we had, the State Technical Committee. So we are now the sort of executionist phases of the first species that we identified. We're working with the greenhouse industry to see if we can actually start implementing the cooling pads. That is something that we are pushing as a interim practice. We are engaging with the citrus industry as well to see what projects we can assist them with, that given the case that we do not have a specific strategy to work with them as well. Another industry that we are reaching out very aggressively is the forestry. In fact, I will be attending to their annual, the Foresters Association meeting. It's Florida Foresters Association that they're meeting early fall, I think, or late summer. I will be attending to their meeting. In fact, I find out that this is the first time that a state conservationist will be addressing their annual meeting. So that is just a few sample of the people that we're trying to expand our customer base. Our financial assistance portfolio is looking healthy. I would love to see it stronger, as always. By now, you have gotten used to that I'm pretty aggressive with anything to do with financial investments. Amber will give you an update into how are we doing. I feel good about it. I really do. We requested an additional $6 million. I'm crossing my fingers that we're going to get it. I'm not a huge fan of requesting funds at the very end of the fiscal year, but I do feel compelled that we need to continue to increase our obligations so that we are better positioned in following allocations in years, future allocations, I should say. The same thing goes with easements. We did request additional funds, and we were successful at securing some additional funds already. RCPP, we got a few applicants. We send them forward. We're crossing our fingers to see what we get from the national level. And we continue to do outreach for RCPP. We really want to expand who our customer base. I attended to the Wildlife Corridor meeting too. Very, very good meeting, by the way. It was a very eye-opening of how many groups are coming together into this Wildlife Corridor. What else we have? I know that I'm scatting everywhere, but I wanted to give you sort of a briefing as much as I can. NWQI, we will have a National Water Quality Initiative application being forwarded to headquarters, centric into the Indian River Lagoon that we're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and a few more folks the Brevard County area. And more things that it will come to my head as we meet. I don't want to govern this time, but I wanted to welcome you all. And once again, please be as forthcoming. And if any topics that you want to add. Now, I wanted to see if online, I do have a pending request from either AFCD or FDAC to see if somebody can give us a briefing into the SB 1078. Is somebody online that might be able to do that, either from AFCD or FDAC?
I can take a shot at that one.
That was Clegg, right?
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. So, Ronnie, whenever you
I can as well. This is Jeff.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for joining, Jeff. Yeah. So
Sure.
maybe can we do it now? Maybe we might as well do it now. And just if you, I mean, now I'm more curious than anything else. Now the fact that DeSantis signed it into law, I think that this is now the appropriate time to brief people into what is the intent of the law and whatever we know. And I know, you know, for the record, I do know, and Clegg and is a lot of more unanswered questions as we evolve into figuring out what this means and how it's going to be implemented. But I wanted to yield the floor to them to give us a briefing into what's happening on that side of the house. And with that, let me see if I have anything pending in my head here. I think that, let me yield the floor back then to, so who wants to go first here? Clegg, do you mind then?
Jeff, why don't you go first?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay,
so,
sure.
Jeff, the floor is yours, and then after then maybe Clegg can finalize it, and then Ronnie, we can pick up the agenda from that point.
Thanks.
So, Jeff, the floor is yours. Thank you, sir.
Okay, everyone can hear me, I assume. Okay. Yes, as we all know, we had basically a day and a half to get people qualified, because that's when the governor signed it, was a day and a half prior to the qualifying period. Actually, through the chaos, it ended up being what we would consider fairly successful. Throughout the whole state, there were only 2 districts that failed to qualify anyone, and those 2 districts had been basically inactive for years. So every other district has at least people in the seats, and several districts have multiple people in the seats. So as far as going forward, we feel pretty positive about it. And, you know, there's still some issues being flushed out regarding geographical districts versus at large. And we're trying to provide direction and on that. But by and by, it was hectic, but I think we weathered the storm and are prepared to move forward.
Clegg, anything to add?
So I agree with what Jeff has just said. I would add a couple of things, because these are questions that we've gotten quite a few of the same questions. So here's one thing that we understood. So the new statute allows for the Department of Agriculture to adopt in each soil water conservation district or county. We can adopt the 5 Board of County Commissioner districts, or the 5 school board districts, or for counties that don't have their county divided into 5 sub-districts, the department can divide them up and do that. And we're required to do that by the end of this calendar year. So we weren't able to get it done for this election, but we do plan on rulemaking that would divide up counties into 5 sub-districts for the next election, which is of course 2 years from now. And in that case, people would have to qualify for one of those sub-districts. They didn't have to do it this time, but they would have to do it 2 years from now. And the complication was a few, I don't know how many, supervisor elections assumed that when the governor signed that if the district was already divided into 5 sections by the Board of County Commissioners seats, a few supervisor elections in certain counties asked supervisors people that wanted to run for soil and water district supervisors to qualify for those sub-districts. There's not much we can do about that. We know it occurred. Not sure that it was a big problem for anybody. It did, I think, in a couple of cases, cause 2 sitting supervisors to have to qualify for the same district that they lived in. So they have to run against one another. But all in all, not a big factor. Secondly, I guess the question we get or gotten is, okay, what does a soil and water conservation district do about vacancies? And I would say that we've talked about this at the department. And here's what we would advise currently. And our advice could change depending on interpretation of the new statute. It's made by someone else, our authority in this case. But if you have a vacancy on the soil and water board now, a vacancy meaning that after qualifying, you have a seat on your board that nobody qualified for and nobody is currently serving in, then those supervisors who are duly elected and qualified at this point in time could fill that vacancy. Secondly, if there is, and those people would have to meet the new qualification in the statute, they'd have to attest that they meet the qualifications. The new statute requires the people to be certified to be a supervisor. Secondly, if you have, for example, if you have a case where you have a duly elected and qualified supervisor serving now in a seat, but they didn't qualify to run at the election in November, then that seat will become vacant as of next January, when new supervisors are supposed to take office. Then the new supervisors of that district, after they take office in January 2023, could appoint a new supervisor that meets the qualifications. And at that point in time, the Department of Agriculture will have divided counties into 5 sub-districts, and so that person would have to qualify for a sub-district. And they couldn't already be somebody that's serving in that sub-district. You couldn't have 2 people from the same sub-district. The last thing I'll say is the Department of Agriculture plans to once again allow AFCD to take questions and consolidate them, provide them to us, and then we would do another webinar to address those questions at a future date. I'm not sure when that would be, but sometime in the future. That's all I have, Juan.
Thank you. Thank you for the briefing, both Jeff and Clay. Any questions for Clay or Jeff, or me for that fact? Okay, Ronnie. Thank you, guys.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. We continue then with the first presentation. Next slide. Okay, yeah, Amber Till, Assistant State Conservationist for Program, will give her update.
Hi there. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see faces in the room. Hope to meet everyone that's on the line. I just started here in Florida about 2.5 months ago. I've been with NRCS around 15 years. I've been with state programs for around 10. And for that period of time, I spent the last 2 years as a RCPP coordinator. So I'm shifting back from the partnerships and over to the financial assistance conservation programs. So I'm glad to be here and thanks for having me. Next slide. All right, so the 3 big financial assistance programs are going to be our EQIP program, Environmental Quality Incentives Program. Welcome. Our new program, which is EQIP Conservation Incentive Contracts and Conservation Stewardship Program. So I'd just like to say that this new program, EQIP CIC, it's a bit of a hybrid. It's a bit EQIP and it's a bit CSP. It's a transition place for growers. to address resource concerns that are getting close to that stewardship level, to help them to go to stewardship. So this year so far, we've had a total of 542 contracts. We are continuing to obligate. We are at 100% obligation for our CSP program. So 137 contracts is probably what we're looking at for this year. And for EQIP, it actually, the obligation rate is bundled for EQIP and EQIP CIC. So we're at 89% presently. And these numbers have changed a little bit since I gathered this data last week. But in total, we have almost $30 million that we've obligated for our financial assistance programs. And, you know, hopefully we'll go over that with the funding request of the additional 6.5 million. And right now we're at around 268,000, almost 269,000 acres treated with those contracts. So, yes.
On CSP, we've returned CSP funds this year, right?
We did.
How much we returned?
We returned just around $1.4 million.
And the importance of asking these is, once again, we have improved tremendously, because when we started, I almost returned more than half. So that now we're still returning funds on CSP, but lesser. But we still have that goal to have a program that is true competitive in nature. The reality is that we need that program to continue to gain some ground and esteem. We're not using the full allocation, and that is not looking that great in Florida, particularly because many states in the Southeast region do have a demand. And we are returning funds where others are seeking funds. So that is something that our growth and programmatically is very heavy on CSP. At the point that we stop returning funds, that's when we are at par. So we're not even there yet. We're still buggy. So, but I just wanted to make a reference into the fact that, yes, we have good obligations, but we can do a little better.
Yes. And I'll just take a moment to talk about CSP. There are three flavors of CSP. There's what we call classic, which is something that, you know, just every farmer can apply for. If they've reached a certain stewardship level, you know, we could get them a contract, especially since we returned funds this year. Now, we also have another flavor, which is the renewal. So producers that have had a CSP contract in the past, they have an opportunity for renewals after their first 5 years. And then lastly, we have a program called Conservation or Grasslands Conservation Initiative. It's called GCI. So those three flavors are bundled into that total just about $8.4 million. So we definitely have lots of opportunities with CSP, right? We have just someone that wants to start fresh, someone that wants to renew, and someone that might have an emphasis on the grasslands conservation. All right, next slide. I'm going to focus here on how we have our EQIP funding. You know, it's a bigger allocation, and so we split it out to address different priorities. And as to date, for our national initiatives, which I'm going to give you a little more detail about the national initiatives and the state initiatives. The local priorities, there's a lot of them, and I've really just only summarized that here on this slide. So we have these three big categories. Right now we have most of the funding you'll see is going to those local priorities. It's going to local issues in local counties, local conservation districts. So almost 10 million, we'll be at 10 million for sure. So we're addressing invasives, we're addressing, you know, livestock practices, cropland, forestry. So again, local priorities. State initiatives, we've taken about 2.4 million so far, and I will show you the subset. And then a national initiative, right? Headquarters has said, hey, we have these funding opportunities for you. We would like for you to offer them. Here are your allocations. Next slide. So for our national initiatives, right now we have three. It's called in the Joint Chiefs Kogan Grass. Now that is going to be a very small area. Joint Chiefs is a partnership program. It's a program in which the Forest Service and NRCS are working together to identify and prioritize areas for funding for forestry, predominantly forestry. There's an opportunity for funding of, let's see, notice of fundings are out right now for Joint Chiefs. So if anyone is aware of, a forest out there where you've got resource concerns and that could be addressed on the Forest Service lands and private lands, this Joint Chiefs program is an opportunity. It's right now we have just around $75,000. We have a lot of opportunity in front of us to apply for those programs. All right, another program that's pretty long-standing, it's the Longleaf Pine Initiative. We have a pretty regular allocation for that program. Here in Florida, it's predominantly in the Panhandle, a little bit in the Central Florida area. There's sometimes, occasionally, it goes down to the South Florida area. And then we have another partnership initiative. It's called Working Lands for Wildlife. It's a partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And this particular one is emphasizing gopher tortoise. So we have about 2.3 million. And, we always have opportunities to request more funding. For longleaf pine, we have unmet demand. We have about $6 million out there of applications that we would like to fund. We've asked for funding from headquarters. It's just a little short this year. So the demand for that initiative is very high. All right, next slide. All right, so right now, these are our state initiatives. It's kind of a long list. I'm gonna group the first two. Right now, we've spent just about $400,000 on our historically underserved cadre. So that would be beginning farmers, socially disadvantaged farmers, those individuals that self-certify that they meet those criteria. We have another initiative that it's state, but it was kind of identified at a national level. So it's a climate smart program. We have also something called conservation planning activities. So we didn't fund a lot of that this year. However, the opportunity is there for partners who can be technical service providers that can provide planning assistance to producers. So we basically set aside funding for a technical service provider to do planning with a producer. Typically, NRCS does the planning. So in this case, NRCS is doing more planning than, say, our technical service providers. All right, so NRCS also here in Florida set aside money for forestry, for our working lands for wildlife, priority species. Here we have a Florida Wildlife Action Plan, and the first on the list for us to address was the bobwhite quail. I believe that we fully funded all the applications for that particular state initiative. A few others here, we have on-farm energy opportunities for producers that want to improve energy conservation. We have something that's also very popular, the seasonal high tunnel. So you want to extend the growing season or protect crops from wind damage or sun damage. And then strike force, the first and the second, those are actually for historically underserved communities. And then lastly, we have a new initiative I'll talk about just in a few minutes, urban farming. And we don't actually have a obligation yet. So, so far, state initiatives, we have about $2.4 million. Next slide. All right, so urban agriculture. This is new to NRCS. We did have an urban emphasis in the past, I'd say probably 15 years ago, and we shifted back to, more typical operations. And urban farming, is a way for us to get services and financial assistance to all types of producers, not just someone that's, you know, out in a rural area with, you know, a forest operation or, you know, a dedicated crop operation. These are folks that are, you know, in that matrix of that urban area where, you know, you've got residential, you've got commercial, but you've also got opportunities to have some urban farming. So we had a sign-up deadline for May 13th. We received 31 applications. We'll be making funding decisions very shortly. I think that's today, actually. I think the demand is over $500,000, and we have around $500,000 to allocate to applications. So urban farming is, you know, where we're going to next, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to be servicing all of our other clients that we have in the past, because we have local funding pools for them. We have forestry funding pools. We have, you know, wildlife funding pools. So we're just bringing everyone else into the fold. And next slide. So just to give you a snapshot of the focus of urban agricultural initiative. And next slide. I think I've reached my questions section. Any questions?
I don't see anything in the chat at this time.
We'll probably have a fair amount of information for you, how we're going to be rolling out fiscal year 22. So stay tuned for the next meeting. Thank you.
Oh, I just got a question.
Oh.
Sorry. What types of assistance are available for urban farmers?
Okay, so we're looking to address priority resource concerns in the urban landscape. Oftentimes it's water quality, maybe degraded plant condition, perhaps some soils, and you know, financial assistance is going to be anything that you've got there in that urban landscape. So maybe you have a crops land situation, maybe you have limited irrigation efficiency, maybe you want to improve your soils. So it's really not different than what we do now, right? It just happens to be in the urban landscape.
So Cynthia clarified to me that I should be closer to the computer when I wanted to add anything. And see, Amber made a point. We will be discussing our sort of a next year's allocation process. And what I can tell you out of the gate is that we are aggressively pursuing how we can shift funding to the local level. The reality is that right now, we still sort of a backwards, in my opinion, that we have more monies allocated at the state and much less at the local. And I want to really flip that upside down to the greatest extent possible. And we have been doing the math. It's more difficult actually towns to shift that many resources the whole way around. But I think that right now we might be sitting at a 75-25, that 25 will be at the state level, 75 will be at the local. And that's what we're trying to get to that math. And that's what you should be expecting. It would not be, once again, perfection the first year, but that will be the sense of what we're heading overall, is to maintain a higher level of funding at the local level, constraining to some extent the state, because this is intended, EQIP is a program that is intended for locally led. And we want to go back to that essence, that to the greatest extent possible, we want to translate local work group recommendations that are aligned with a local funding pool that is associated with a local ranking. So that's the whole idea of we going back to almost the basics of how these should work. Instead of from the top down, it will be basically from the bottom up to the greatest extent. It will never be 100%, but that's what you should be expecting. And Amber will come up with the figures at a later time. In the next meeting, of course, we'll give you the briefing, but that's what I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Well, now we're going to have Nathan Ficker, State Resource Conservationist, Ecological Sciences, provide us an update. And I believe, Nathan, you were online, right?
I am. Thank you, Ronnie.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to quickly review the conservation practice standard and guidance document review process that we are currently involved in. A little background, the 2018 Farm Bill required that all NRCS conservation practice standards be reviewed at a national level and then reviewed and adopted by the states. So that basically was a reset for all of our conservation practices. Nationally, they put these practices out in various groupings on the Federal Register, and that goes through the full Federal Register comment period. If you're interested in looking at that, you can simply find the Federal Register at the federalregister.gov. And if you search keywords like conservation practice standard or National Handbook of Conservation Practices, you can find those postings on the Federal Register, review those standards at a national level, and make comments if you would like. Once the practice standards have gone through that Federal Register process and NRCS at a national level has made all the updates and additions that they want to make, those are then sent to us at the state level. We at the state can make a conservation practice more strict, so to speak, than what nationally is required, but we can't make something less stringent. So let's say nationally, they have a requirement to review pesticides for certain practices or evaluate pesticide risk for certain practices. We as a state can't remove that. We could make it more strict, but we can't remove things like that. Next slide, please. So once we get them as a state, we're going to review. That would be myself, the state resource conservationist, or Jason Strength, the state conservation engineer. We take a look at it. We will make edits with our staff, with some input here. And then we will go through another similar process to the Federal Register. And that we're going to do this with our top 15 most used or most applied conservation practice standards in the state. So we will send those documents out through the state technical committee email. We recently did this with a few practices. I know from the ECS side, we did the pasture and hayland planting practice 512. We went through this 30-day comment period. We did get some comments, and we will try to incorporate those as much as we can, if applicable. We also send these out to our area and field offices for the same amount of review time. So everyone will hopefully kind of be on the same window. We give that 30-day period to provide comments. And once we get that feedback, we again will evaluate that and see how we can incorporate any of those suggestions if we deem that to be applicable. Once we go through that review, and if we've added items or made changes, we then release those documents, and that would be the practice standard and our implementation requirements, statement of work, operation and maintenance, any associated documents, and we upload that up to the section 4 of the field office tech guide. And once it makes it there, that's pretty much official for that time period for that conservation practice. Now, we will always accept feedback or comments on our conservation practice standards. We can make changes if something new arises or we, again, deem it applicable. So these aren't necessarily set in stone, but this is the process that we are trying to go through. And hopefully through this comment period, we do get them right and make them work well for the state of Florida, and we don't have to edit and make changes, at least not on a too regular basis. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right, we can always come back to it later if needed, but hearing none, next slide, please, Ronnie. I just wanted to also briefly discuss the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership. Amber mentioned that a little bit, and our existing project for Kogan grass treatment up in the Panhandle as a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and a couple other partners as well. We are currently in a period where they are accepting additional proposals for other Joint Chiefs partnership projects. That application period is open until August 5th. And then NRCS and Forest Service Joint Chiefs evaluate those proposals, and they are projected to announce those projects in the late fall of 2022. Priorities include, but are certainly not limited to, reduction of wildfire risk, increased forest workforce capacity, and increased benefits to historically underserved communities, and climate mitigation and adaptation effort. There are a bunch more, and if you want more information, we have this press release posted on our NRCS Florida website at the link listed on the slide. So that's about the information I have on that for now, but I certainly can take questions if anybody has any.
Question for Nathan. Who's the best point of contact to work through a potential proposal for this opportunity?
Did you hear that, Nathan?
Yeah, it certainly can be myself. I can then find who the right person would be to submit something up. But again, highly encourage you. The press release is good on the website, gives you a lot of information. But I can certainly be the contact and field questions and elevate or get to the people who specifically might have a better answer.
Thanks.
All right, that is all I have for ECS updates at this time.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. So with that, we transition over to Denise Liggett, Management Analyst, for a Partnerships and Initiatives update.
Thank you, Ronnie. Right, watch for questions. Can't do them both at the same time. I can change the slides, but I can't. Okay. I want to say thank you for having me today, and I'm happy to be presenting for the partnership staff. Many of you already know Nina Bhattacharya is on a detail, and she's been asked to extend that detail a little longer. So during her absence, Hilary Barnhart will be the acting state conservationist for partnerships and initiatives. And Hilary is currently a district conservationist with the Blountstown Service Center. And she is not with us today, but I wanted to let you all know she will be in contact with many of our partners. Since January at the last state technical committee meeting, the partnership staff has grown from 1 to 4, and that would include myself. Again, I'm Denise Liggett. I'm the management analyst. I've been with NRCS for approximately 15 years. I started my career in Ohio, transferred to Florida in 2015 on the management strategy team as a business services specialist, and I'm very happy to have transitioned to my partnership position here. Some of my coworkers that are present today, first of all, Cynthia Pointe-Latane. She's our public affairs specialist. Cynthia, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Good morning. I'm Cynthia Pointe-Latane, your new public affairs specialist for NRCS. And I'm not new to USDA as a whole. I've got 20 years in with USDA agencies, 3 to be exact, including NRCS, which is my favorite of the 3 that I've worked for. And I've also worked with the Office of Advocacy and Outreach. So I'm really excited to be back with NRCS. I always said if I could come back to USDA, it would be NRCS, because I believe in our mission, in stewardship of our land, water, and air resources for future generations. And that is where I got my start in a career with public affairs. I was with NRCS for 8 years, started from the bottom, went all the way to state PAS in New York. And then I jumped the fence, so to speak, to FSA and worked regional and national public affairs there. And then I joined the Office of Advocacy and Outreach. I won't belabor with my long history in private university, 1890 communications, most recently in Tallahassee. But I have been in Gainesville since April and actually joined NRCS here at the end of February. Thank you, Juan, for the opportunity to serve here. And I feel like I'm with a brand new agency. I'm so excited about all of the changes and partnerships. So my job is to help tell the stories of our success so that we can increase participation in our programs. And I will be doing that by furthering our content sharing relationships with our partners, with news media, going out into the field and talking with the people that we serve, landowners, farmers, partners, and sharing those stories with news media in new and innovative ways. So news media contacts, we're revamping or redesigning our website on a national level. So I'm involved in that effort too, and help keep the content up to date there as well. So I welcome any suggestions. You can find my contact information on the website. And if you've got a story that you're itching to tell, call me or email me or chat with me, and I'll be happy to come out and help you capture that story and share it. That's it. Okay, thanks.
And what you've been requesting is suggestions of events that we could be able to attend.
Oh, yes. So we've got a working list of different events that happen throughout the state where we can either exhibit or participate, or one of our specialists can come out and speak. But if you have any suggestions, please let us know, because now that things have opened up around the state, we're able to get out more, and we do have funding to do that. So, thanks.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next up is Rochelle Urquhart, our outreach specialist. Michelle's online today. Rochelle, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, great. I'm not sure if you're showing video, so I turn on my video so people can see me, or not, that's fine.
Sorry.
All right, so hi everyone. I'm Rochelle Urquhart. I'm the new outreach coordinator for NRCS Florida, and some background about me. I started last month in May, and prior to joining NRCS, I served as the public affairs specialist for rural development in Florida and the Virgin Islands. And I was also a public affairs specialist at the Miami BA healthcare system and the Department of Interior Bureau of Land Management in Nevada, and also as a state office program technician for the Nevada State Farm Service Agency. So I'm happy to be on board, and I've been working for the federal government for almost 20 years. And that's it. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Rochelle. So my slide is not advancing. So you can do it from the mouse too. We're having a little technical difficulties. Please stand by. Okay, conservation innovation grants. So, NRCS Florida is the state conservation innovation grant program. And we recently posted a notice of funding opportunity, which we're still accepting applications until August 31st. A total of $900,000 available, and individual projects will range from $25,000 to $250,000. The priorities for 2023: soil health, grazing, climate resilience in urban agriculture. And there were 2 webinars held recently. Those recordings can be viewed on our NRCS Florida website, and the link is attached to the slides, which will be posted. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I failed to mention that the National CIG notice of funding opportunity will be announced this summer. I just found that out yesterday. And if you would like to receive any updates regarding CIG or any other conservation programs, you can go to the USDA NRCS website to add your email address to sign up to receive notifications. Just an FYI there. So the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, part of my responsibilities here with the partnership team is to administer this program for our state. The partnership program promotes coordination of NRCS conservation activities with our partners. There was a call for proposal. National Conservation Partnership proposals were, the deadline was April. Florida received 2 proposals for the classic RCPP, and they were evaluated, and both were recommended for funding to the state conservationist, and he agreed. We've sent that recommendation to headquarters, and now we are awaiting award notification, which should be announced in August. Further information about the NRCS RCPP program is available online at the website there on the slide, or you can just search NRCS RCPP, how to apply.
A very intuitive website.
Yes. And my contact information is also listed there if you need any assistance or have questions. Next slide, please. Okay, the local working group. So I'm going to provide an overview of the local working groups, just kind of a reminder as to what it is and why. So the USDA policy dictates the locally led conservation process. Local working groups, standard operating procedure for those local working groups. The intent is to provide recommendations on local natural resource priorities and criteria. And they're usually chaired by the soil and water conservation districts in each county. The local work group responsibilities include public involvement and the conservation needs assessment. They hold public meetings and develop a local conservation action plan. And then the local work group recommendations are submitted to the state technical committee. So the local working group are a subcommittee of the state technical committee. Next slide, please. And this is just a reminder of the process. It's the same every year. In June, NRCS releases the local working group questionnaire. September, meeting details are posted to the Association of Florida Conservation Districts and the NRCS website. October through November, the groups meet, submit their questionnaires to NRCS. In January, at the State Technical Committee, NRCS reports the summary of the local working group responses to those questionnaires. And then in June, NRCS reports the final decisions to the State Technical Committee. Next slide, please. So in January, we provided a local work group summary report by area with the intent to provide an update on how we will incorporate those recommendations into the June committee meeting. But based on lessons learned and input gathered from local field offices, the tech committee, the local working groups, the following actions are what NRCS has decided to move forward with for this year. Each NRCS field office will have a funding pool that they can use to address local priorities and resource concerns. This will be per field office instead of by area. And the field offices will review local work group recommendations on an annual basis. And they will also develop their ranking criteria from the individual pool, taking into consideration the recommendations of the local working groups. This will provide consistency across the state. We've done the same in every service center each year. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here on this slide is a snapshot of the responses from 4 of our service centers from the local working groups responses to the questionnaire. You can actually see the full list of responses and priority resource concerns gathered from each service center by following the link there on the screen or searching for NRCS Florida local working groups. So these recommendations are based on priorities from the local working group and their responses to the online survey. Next slide, please. So the Natural Resource Conservation Service has a cooperative agreement with the Association of Florida Conservation Districts. And in this agreement, the AFCD, as we call them, develop and execute a plan to gather the local working group recommendations. They post the program information online in advance of the meetings. They organize the local work group meetings, create the online questionnaire for us and send it out or post it, and combine the survey results and provide NRCS with a report. And then they also provide recommendations for the next fiscal year. So on our next presenter will be Kaylee Pate from the Association of Florida Conservation Districts, and she's going to provide some guidance for the local working group moving forward this year. Yes, Juan.
It's important to clarify that these agreements actually have helped us catapult our participation in the local work groups, because prior to this agreement, we had a success rate of about 20%. That's what we were collecting feedback from the local work groups. And the first year of this agreement, we reached, I believe that it was an 80% response rate from the local work group, so that we quadrupled the response basically from this agreement alone. So that's why we are renewing it to do the same thing for this coming year, so that we create already a sort of a framework of how we should proceed. And that is the intent. And I have decided to basically renew this agreement with AFCD to create that framework that it will continue to allow the success rate from local feedback. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Next slide, please. One more. One more slide. There you go. Okay, Kaylee Pate with the Association of Florida Conservation Districts will discuss the local working group activities.
Hey everyone, for those of you that
Go ahead, Kaylee.
sorry, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kaylee. I work with the Association of Florida Conservation Districts, and I started working on the local working group activities last year when we got this agreement with NRCS. I'm going to go over today basically the plan moving forward, and then also some recommendations that we received from partners, from NRCS, from the districts, on how to make the process better for this coming year. Next slide, please. So based on recommendations, like I said, from partners, from NRCS, from the districts, we are going to facilitate a local working group training session. In that training session, we're going to go over the purpose of the purpose and the importance of the local working group, the intent of that, and what the roles of us at AFCD, the roles of NRCS, and the role of the district itself are as part of the local working group. That's going to be held virtually on July 26th, and I will be sending all of that information out very soon. Another recommendation that we received was communication. Was kind of I do think that we had a lot of success last year, but we definitely have some room to grow. So this year, I'm going to be asking the district to get one single point of contact from their board for any of the local working group. That way it will improve our communication between me, NRCS, and the district. It gets a little wonky when you're communicating with each individual from the entire board and NRCS and AFCD. So I really do hope that that will improve our communication. For more structured and uniformed meetings, we are planning to follow a set agenda for each individual meeting. And we are also going to provide at that training session an advertising template that is going to be fillable. The districts can go in and fill in their individual information and use that to advertise at the local level. We can, public notice these meetings all day long, but let's face it, it's 2022 and most people don't read the newspaper anymore. So it really is up to advertising them at the local level to gain more participation from the landowners in the area and the producers and everyone. Next slide, please. These here are just upcoming dates. Like I said, that training session is going to be on July 26th. It is going to be on Zoom and it is going to be recorded. So for the folks that are not able to participate, they can go back and watch it. We are going to introduce an introductory packet at that training session, and it's going to have all information that you need for a successful local work group meeting. It's going to have a draft agenda. It's going to have draft meeting minutes. It's going to have draft outreach material. It's going to have a draft PowerPoint that you can use to run your meeting. It's going to have everything that a district needs to have a successful meeting. And we've also created a tab on our AFCD website that's going to have all of this information on there. So it's a one-stop shop for local working group meetings. I will be reaching out to everyone soon to start gathering dates for the next round of them. Once again, they will be between October and November. August 12th is going to be the deadline that we need the dates at AFCD so that we can submit them to NRCS by our deadline. And then, of course, October 1st, local work group meetings begin. Next slide, please. Does anybody have questions or suggestions for me?
Your question? Well, it was not about this. Okay. I don't see any in the chat or in the room at this time, Kaylee. Thank you so much.
Yes, and if you guys think of anything at a later date, please, most of you know how to get in contact with me. I'm open to suggestions. If any of you guys have any that I haven't received for how to make this next year better.
Thank you, Kaylee. Good job carrying up forward last year's agreement and looking forward for this upcoming year. Good job.
Yes, thank you so much, Juan. You guys have a great day.
You too. So before we jump to Ronnie, then what was your...
Oh, that was for partnership.
Yes,
staff with Denise,
please.
you guys. RCPP AFA, which I guess is the flavor. CPP, thoughts or prognosis on those? I guess there haven't been any applications.
We did not receive any applications this year for that particular for the alternative.
What's your outlook for next year? Is this something y'all have thoughts about the program or?
About AFA?
Yeah, or from other states or?
From other participants taking AFA?
Yeah, I just don't know much about it. I'm wondering if it's how it's working out in other states.
It varies the complexity that you're seeking to do because AFA really requires you to take care from the cradle to the grave. The alternative funding arrangement, that's what AFA stands for, alternative funding arrangement. And in essence, it shifts a lot of the work to the partner. Yes, they have a greater TA contribution coming to them, but it's because they will have a much greater lion's share of what needs to take place. So that the involvement from the partner on an alternative funding arrangement is quite extensive, I have to say. So you will never see this huge demand for it because many partners start doing the math and they realize this is bigger than what I should get involved myself in. Goes for everything. I mean, the ability is so many moving parts to this thing that most partners realize, thank you, I pass. But we do have some that they have taking on that.
I can just speak for where I came from. We had 2 alternative arrangement projects. One of the bigger challenges just for the AFA in general is that partners are also, if they want to propose an truly alternative funding model, there's an environmental compliance piece. NRCS has our conservation practices. They've been rigorously reviewed through an environmental review process. If a partner chooses to go a path alternative to our conservation practices, then that really brings another environmental review into it. So that is a complexity that if a partner wants to go pay for performance or other types of models that are not using NRCS conservation practices, that can be very challenging and alternative.
You mean like NEPA?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, gotcha.
Yeah, so that becomes a big
That's a
issue.
huge deal.
Yeah,
Right. And that's above and beyond what Juan just shared.
okay, so the partner might have to do NEPA.
If they go outside traditional conservation practices, because the categorical exclusions developed, they are based on a
for Florida NRCS. And so with that, let's begin the first slide. Not the peak. I can actually see it here. All right. So what are the easements in Florida, and very much so for the entire nation in every state? We have agricultural land easements, in which NRCS provides financial assistance to eligible partners for purchasing ag easements to keep land in agriculture and protected grazing uses. So what do we mean by partners? We mean Indian tribes, state and local governments, and non-governmental organizations, typically land trusts, but not necessarily just a land trust. The idea is we're looking for partners to come to us and say, we have a conservation easement program of our own, and we have funds that we can use to acquire this easement from a landowner. Would NRCS be interested in providing up to 50% of the value of that easement? And if it's a grassland of special significance, that could actually, the contribution from NRCS can be up to 75%. So that's one, and it's actually a growing portion of the easement programs in NRCS Florida. The largest program, though, historically, has been the wetland reserve easements. NRCS provides technical and financial assistance to landowners in this case, and Indian tribes, to acquire, restore, protect, enhance wetlands through the purchase of a wetland reserve easement. So here, we do take, as in most of our programs, applications directly from the landowner. Landowners who are interested in selling the rights to the surface of their land so that NRCS, USDA can convert it into a wetland. And they get to keep some basic rights. They can sell the property at whatever value is left after the easement is on there. They can enjoy it for quiet recreational purposes, hunting and fishing, and control access. It's not public land, it's still private land. The NRCS USDA only holds the right to manage the surface of this private land as a wetland. And then thirdly, we, as of 2018, now have a standalone regional conservation program, partnership program, which offers easements of all kinds, of any kind, really, in theory, as long as it meets some basic program objectives. We provide financial assistance, technical assistance through partnership agreements So these can be your conventional ag easement, wetland easement, forest land easement, but others that we haven't typically done in the past. Floodplain easement, wildlife, endangered species, pure habitat, you name it. It still needs to meet the US eligibility requirements for the landowners, the private landowners. And of course, it comes to us through an approved RCPP proposal. All right, so with that, I'm gonna ask, next slide. Michael Bush, who is recently taking on the responsibility of being the Wetland Reserve Easement Coordinator for the state, to talk about WRE.
All right, thank you, Ronnie. Yeah, my name is Michael Bush. I'm recently been appointed to be the Wetland Reserve Easement Coordinator. And so basically my job is to take in applications from the field, from private landowners, look at the eligibility of those applications and rank those applications and fund the best of those applications moving forward. So first line here, there's a lot going on in this slide, but I'm going to try to explain it from point by point. We have a $19,935,190 pot of money for all of our wetland easements. Ronnie mentioned there's 3 types of easements in ASEP. I'm in charge of the wetland reserve easements. It's to some extent the wetland reserve program easements, which that program is no longer available, but we still hold on to those easements and manage those easements. So although it's kind of an expired program, we'll get to it. There's still a lot of work to be done forever. These are perpetual easements. So in this big pot, we have almost 20 million. And we have another pot of money for what we call enrollment and restoration, $14,635,190. This is what we have for the projects from 2021, those applications from 2021. And I'll get to that process in a moment, but basically we have 4 projects that were pre-approved in 2021, and we are going to use those funds, the 14 million and change, to approve, get those projects acquired, restored. And so some of the new things that we have going on with this program is when we get money from our headquarters, we have to make sure that we plan these properties out and set aside restoration funding and closing funds so that these projects can be carried through to the full extent. So those 4 projects that we were approved for in 2021, we will use $2022 at 14 and change. The other set of money that we deal with, this other pot of money, is for stewardship. There's $5.3 million for stewardship. And this covers all of our easements that we have on the books, both from our current program, the wetland reserve easements, and our wetland reserve program easements, which we stopped acquiring in 14. So what does this money mean? This is money we use basically to treat exotics, plant new native plants. We also do prescribed burning. There's lots of different things we can do to enhance these projects. This all is land management or enhancement of these easements that have already been acquired and restored. Roughly 200,000 acres of these easements are across the state, mostly associated with the Northern Everglades. Some are in Central Florida. We do have a couple in the north area around Gainesville. So there's 200,000 acres. Cornell Francis is in charge of stewardship, and he's working with all these easements to try to prioritize how to use this money best, where to spend it first, how much to spend on each project, which ones we should spend on first. So Cornell Francis is in charge of stewardship, and he's going to be overseeing that money moving forward. Any questions on the top so far?
The stewardship, you mentioned the assessment, or that's coming, Ronnie, do you know? Or something about the assessment that we're doing?
For the stewardship,
Yeah.
No, it's not. You want to talk about it?
Basically, we have 150 or so WRE and WRP easements on the books. And so we have to look at all those projects and determine how do we take $5.3 million and make it spread across those projects appropriately, effectively? What needs those dollars the most right away? Which things can wait? So we've been working with the Fish and Wildlife Commission, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and some other folks to try to come up with a assessment project, process tool to determine where that money should be spent first. Yeah.
In essence, due to the volume, we recognize that $5.3 million will not suffice. It will not be enough to address the needs that we know exists out there in the 200,000 acres. So given that we know that we don't have enough resources, we have taken upon the task of with the commission to evaluate all of these easements to establish where's the most critical need. And this money is not only one shot at it. It is our intent to continue to request the stewardship funds in future years. But I want to use that ranking, and if I'm not mistaken, that is a 3-year, right? And we will be done in 3-year window. All easements will be evaluated and they will be appropriately ranked so that when future allocations related to a stewardship, we will know where to invest them. Now, of course, there will be some level of fluid process because we are doing these evaluations, we learn new things about the status of these easements, but the idea behind is to guide or educate our decision process of where we should invest the available dollars in any given fiscal year. This year is $5.3 million. The next fiscal year, I don't know. We are bound to get some, but I don't know how much. But it is our intent to aggressively pursue actually stewardship funds, and that will be an ongoing strategy from us going forward, because this is looking almost backwards. The $14.6 million is looking forward, and the $5.3 million is looking backwards. And that's how we're managing overall the WRE easements in Florida. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, moving on to the second set of bullet points. I'm going to start with the second point first. Let's try to make this, I think, a little bit more simple. Basically, our new method of operation, we call it rollover applications, is to take in applications from a current fiscal year, evaluate them for program eligibility, NEPA or environmental considerations, and use the next year's funding to fund those projects. So it gives us some more time to figure out, how much it's going to cost to restore it, all the planning that's needed up front, make sure we do our due diligence and get the best projects into the door. So once we do that, looking at the top bullet, 11 WRE applications needing funding of over $41 million. So these are, we had pretty much, I think, 22 applications for 2022. And out of those, we deemed 11 of those needing funding. They met the requirements for eligibility and that they're worthy projects to award funding to. So we will be using, hopefully, the money we get in 2023. Whether we get 41 million, probably not, we'll see. We're going to request that. And so that goes to the state resource assessment. That's our agency's tool to assess our resource needs moving forward. And so we will use the state resource assessment to request those funding needs. On to the third bullet point, it's something that we changed this prior fiscal year, was getting approval for 80% compensation of the appraisal. So we do an appraisal when we want to acquire an easement, and we are now able to offer 80% of that value for that fee simple appraisal to the landowner for managing their rights of the property in terms of development and surface rights. And so we have an 80% compensation that we're able to offer now, and we're hoping to use that again next year with our WRE easement applications. So that's just something we think that based upon the market and the development push that's going on, we might need a little bit more incentive for those landowners to buy onto that, giving us those rights for compensation. And the last thing we need to talk about, this goes with the working groups, is the ranking approval. This past year, we added a historically underserved priority question so that those individuals that self-certify or self-determine through the tool to be historically underserved would get a priority over those that do not. Another change that we're looking at this year is looking at the Florida Conservation Network that's been discussed, wildlife corridors throughout the state, and using that to prioritize our applications, similar to how we did with applications that fell into the Northern Everglades over the past year. So using that, the new wildlife corridor stuff that's coming out to the state.
And Sentinel.
Yeah, Sentinel landscapes. Yep. And so we're going to push that into our rankings under the review of the working groups. That's all I have so far on this. If you guys have any questions.
The question in the chat, what was the previous compensation rate?
Previously in 2020, we were using GARC, Ronnie?
Yes, we were using, we did an statewide market analysis through which we established regional rates per acre for anyone that applied so that people would know. But we went away from that, like many other states, because the restrictions on those rates were becoming so cumbersome, so that if somebody had a piece of orchard that they wanted to offer us, and it was 500 acres, and the statewide market analysis compared or used orchards that were only up to 450 acres, then we could not use the GARC, and we had to go to an appraisal because this orchard was outside the range of properties that the market analysis had considered. We argued against that to no avail, so we decided to go to appraisals because we would have to do appraisals in.
And in 2021, we were approved at 70%. That was the previous rate, although we did not acquire any properties at that rate. 70 was the previous compensation rate. So, any other questions from the field?
Nothing else in the chat at this time.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Sarah, let me just introduce quickly Sarah May, who is, like Michael Bush, the state coordinator for the agricultural land easement programs. Easements.
Everyone, I'm just going to give a quick summary of our fiscal year 22 ALE and RCPP acquisitions. For 22, we got an initial allocation of right under $5 million. We also were able to kind of reallocate through a substitute parcel $3 million. We had 3 ALE applications from 3 different partners. We ranked them out. We were able to fund the top 2 ranked applications, and that used almost exactly our full $8 million. So we have 1 application that's going to roll over for next year. We're anticipating even more applications for next fiscal year. And as far as the 23 ranking sheet, it'll be posted on that website for everyone's review. There are very, very little changes from this past year. I updated the fiscal year to 23, and I cleaned up a little bit of the wording on the threatened and endangered species question, and that's it. Okay, and then the RCPP easements from the 2014 Farm Bill, we have 5 RCPP HFRP enrollments that are still pending acquisition. We are working on those. Hope to get those signed and moving forward very quickly. And then for 2018 Farm Bill, we have 3 RCPP projects currently approved, and we are in meeting with the partners. We're getting very close to getting those entity held easement applications coming through on those. And that's all I have, unless there's questions.
How much money we're requesting on ALE? Do you know already for next year? Or we're working on that number still?
I talked to FDAX is anticipating a lot of applications. I talked to Keith yesterday in our monthly meeting, and he was kind of joking, but he said $225 million they can apply for. So it sounds almost unlimited what they could potentially ask for.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We're not going to request.
You can go to the next. All right, and who's the first one? Okay. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we're gonna, and you know what? We're pretty close. But we're 1 minute off the agenda schedule. Wow, that's pretty good. We now enter the general discussion reports, and we begin with Kent Wimmer, Senior Representative and Coordinator, Defenders of Wildlife. Kent, you are online.
I am. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
We can barely hear you though. Can you pump up the
Oh,
volume?
here we go. Put my
There
mic down and you can
There
hear
you
me.
go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I am Kent Wimmer. I'm the coordinator of the newly designated Northwest Florida Sentinel Landscape, and I'm a senior representative with Defenders of Wildlife. Next slide, please. A Sentinel Landscape is a focused area designated by the Departments of Agriculture, Defense, and Interior. In Sentinel Landscapes, these agencies work together with other public agencies and private partners to maintain compatible land uses on working lands that conserve listed species habitat and minimize encroachment threats and constraints to military missions. Northwest Florida was designated Sentinel Landscape in February. It's supported by a partnership of over 4 dozen federal and state agencies, NGOs, regional coalitions, and private landowners, including the NRCS Florida. Through this designation, projects may receive extra priority for conservation projects within the Sentinel Landscape. So that was kind of the driving force, you know, is being able to better position federally funded, state funded, privately funded projects for extra priority, and really appreciate NRCS including the Sentinel Landscapes in their priorities for your programs. Next slide. The 16-county Northwest Florida Sentinel Landscape has hosted military bases since Spanish colonialization. It's home to 6 of the nation's most important installations and ranges spanning 165 miles along the northeastern Gulf of Mexico coast. These installations include Eglin and Tyndall Air Force bases, Hurlbut Field, Naval Air Stations Pensacola and Whiting Field, and Naval Support Activity Panama City. These installations are vital to our national defense because of their training and weapons testing missions. These installations provide direct access to the Eastern Gulf testing and training range, which is larger than all other ranges in the continental United States combined. Next slide. 2 primary challenges facing our installation natural communities are impacts from population growth and climate change. Between 2010 and 2018, the populations of the 5 counties home to the 6 principal installations increased between 6 and 30%. Development can limit the use of prescribed fire and negatively impact surface and groundwaters and threaten estuaries on the Gulf of Mexico. Finally, development in the wrong places may threaten military missions. In 2020, the military represented 28.6% of the total economy of Northwest Florida. Next slide. With rapid population growth and land use conversion, state and regional transportation plans call for widening many highways and constructing new highways, which are shown in light blue on this map. Wildlife crossings will be key to protect wildlife movement of wide-ranging species like the Florida black bear. Next slide. Increasing storm intensity and frequency heightens the urgency for regional collaboration to mitigate the effects of extreme weather, storm surge, sea level rise, and coastal erosion on mission capabilities and natural systems. Our partnership will implement projects that will bolster mission resilience and provide sustainable social, environmental, and economic benefits to our local stakeholders. Next slide. The key strategy our Sentinel landscape is to conserve a connected network of wildlife habitats. This map shows our partners' priority or focus areas, including the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Northwest Florida's exceptional biological diversity can benefit from innovative land stewardship practices, or from innovative stewardship practices on private and public lands surrounding and connecting our military installations. Thriving and recovering populations of listed species on non-military lands provides potential to reduce the regulatory burden associated with on-installation training and testing. For example, the successful stewardship of the Apalachicola National Forest in the Red Hills ensures that two of the largest remaining populations of the endangered red-cockaded woodpecker will continue to thrive outside of Eglin Air Force Base. Next slide. To collaboratively achieve our regional resiliency and sustainability goals, we have formed 3 work groups to serve as our conservation delivery network. Our work groups began meeting virtually in May. Our partnership has monthly collaboration calls as well. So if you'd please contact myself or David Wolf if you'd like to join our partnership or participate in a work group. Next slide. Florida is the first state with 2 Sentinel landscapes, Northwest Florida and the Avon Park Air Force Range. In addition, a 3rd Sentinel landscape has been proposed in Northeast Florida. To ensure there'll be effective coordination among multiple Sentinel landscapes and their partners, 25 parties, including the NRCS Florida, has executed a Sentinel Landscapes in Florida Memorandum of Understanding this past January. This MOU provides an organized framework for federal and state agencies and NGOs to strengthen collaboration and streamline activities that connect private landowners around military installations with voluntary government assistance programs. Next slide. Thank you very much for this opportunity to highlight the Northwest Florida Sentinel landscape. My partner in crime on this is David Wolf, who is our private land stewardship coordinator. He is leading up our work group on private land stewardship, and he will probably be the person that that deals most directly with all you folks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to have Jennifer Cotto-Salisbury, Deputy Director, Central Florida Regional Planning Council of the Avon Park Sentinel Landscape Partnership, give us her presentation report. Jennifer?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, good morning, everyone. And if we could go to the next slide. So I'm Jennifer Cotto-Salisbury. I'm with the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, and the Regional Planning Council serves as the coordinator of the Avon Park Air Force Range Sentinel Landscape. And we've had the great opportunity to work with many of our partners. And Kent, I thank you so much for the great overview of the landscape program. Our region, we're the only regional planning council out of the 10 in the state of Florida that has no coast. We do have a little bit of the coastline of Lake Okeechobee. The Avon Park Air Force Range itself is located in southeast Polk County and northeast Highlands County. So it's within 2 of the counties in our region. And if we can go to the next slide. The actual Sentinel landscape is almost 1.7 million acres, and this is just a little bit so you can see the relationship, the blue area on the map to the right is the Avon Park Air Force Range, and then the area outlined in red is the Avon Park Sentinel landscape itself. And if we can go to the next slide. In working in partnership with a number of organizations and also with the Avon Park Air Force Range, we've continued to implement our priority action plan, which really includes looking at opportunities for voluntary conservation easements and to connect those areas which have wildlife corridors and opportunities for great connectivity, and also to continue outreach and education to property owners who may be interested in voluntary conservation easements, and also continued work with our local governments and realtors and developers on ways to reduce encroachment of development to the mission of the range. And if we can go to the next slide. Speaking of landowner outreach, and also I'll give a shout out to Chad Allison, who formerly helped manage the Sentinel Landscape Program here at the council. We held the second Landowner Assistance Expo. The first was held in 2019. And then due to COVID, we did not have one for a couple of years, but a good part of our outreach was this Landowner Expo. We held it in June in Sebring, and we had about 70 folks attend, and property owners from 6 counties came, and we had about 14 agencies who attended and presented different program options for landowners. And if we can go to the next slide. There were presentations from Archbold Biological Station, information on the Florida Wildlife Corridor, FDACS, UF-IFAS, the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, and other agencies attended and presented, and also had tables with information available for landowners who were interested in programs. We also, through this outreach effort, just made connections with property owners who are interested in the different programs available. And if we can go to the next slide. And speaking of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, Kent, I think, has a better map. We still show Northwest Florida as proposed, which of course now is a Sentinel landscape. And as Kent said, we're one of the first states to have 2 Sentinel landscapes. And we also have the great opportunity to coordinate with each other on efforts in the different parts of the state. And if we can go to the next slide. As part of our work, we are coordinating with Archbold and other partners as we really look at the Florida Wildlife Corridor and the Sentinel landscape, and really look at where our high growth areas are right now in proximity to the wildlife corridor and where there are opportunities. We're also working with local governments to help them coordinate with applicants where there might be opportunities as part of development plans to provide meaningful conservation where there is continued opportunity for connectivity of the corridor. But that's some of the work effort that's going on right now. And then if we can go to the next slide. We're also working in partnership with the range and the Sentinel Landscape partners as we look at updating a joint land use study that was done about 10 years ago. So we're now updating that to the compatible use plan as we work with the community to also continue to protect the mission of the range. And the next slide. I also wanted to take the opportunity the Regional Planning Council has worked in partnership with our communities to form the Heartland Regional Resiliency Coalition. And of course, much of the Sentinel landscape and the Florida Wildlife Corridor and all the efforts we work on are part of creating a resilient future. And I wanted to just take a minute to introduce Sheila McNamara, who's joined our staff. She's a program manager and she's our resiliency manager. And you'll be seeing a lot more of her in these meetings going forward. But Sheila, if I could just turn it over to you for a minute to introduce yourself. And Ronnie, can you do that? Can you give her control just to say hello?
Can you hear
You
me?
can, I don't know, if you unmute your phone, Sheila, you should be able to,
I did. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm Sheila McNamara. I just wanted to say hi. It is really great to work on this program with you all, just because I had worked with a soil and water conservation district and multiple related agencies in Virginia. And then I was promoted to be the program manager for the Chesapeake Bay Preservation, Agricultural and Silvicultural activities, covering Fairfax down to Virginia Beach and out to the Eastern Shore. So it's something that is very passionate to me. And my background is in environmental science, and the combination of that, working with agriculture and now the Sentinel Landscape Program, is just very exciting. So please feel free to reach out to me at the Central Florida Regional Planning Council, and I look forward to working with you.
Okay, thank you, Sheila. And if we can go to our final slide. Great. Just to have our contact information, and I didn't have a chance to add Sheila's, but for anything on the Avon Park Air Force Range, you can reach out to the Regional Planning Council. And also I put Buck McLaughlin's information here. We work definitely in partnership with the Avon Park Air Force Range. And that just concludes our brief update.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Did I say unmute your phone? I did, right?
Yes,
I
you
meant
did, but I understand.
unmute. Yes, unmute your Zoom is what I should have said for anyone else who is going to participate. All right, well, let's continue then with, we have Jess McGuire, Working Lands with Wildlife Bob White Program Coordinator, Quail Forever and Pheasants Forever as our next speaker. Jess?
Hey, good morning. I appreciate getting this opportunity to present to everyone. I'll try to be brief. We're new in Florida, as a number of you know. Quail Forever, we are a conservation nonprofit that's focused on really putting habitat on the ground and helping out partners in any way we can. We kind of pride ourselves in being able to provide the lift in some, for state agencies. So where, they can't hire anymore, or, NRCS can't hire, we try to, kind of fill in some of those gaps for wildlife and conservation efforts. In Florida, we're specifically focusing on Northern Bob White as part of the Working Lands for Wildlife framework. I work very closely with the national NRCS Working Lands for Wildlife staff in DC to facilitate program implementation in various states. So if any of you have any questions about Working Lands for Wildlife, I'm happy to assist. I also work on the Gopher Tortoise project, and as well as I dabble a little bit in the Longleaf Pine Initiative, but we like to leave that to the foresters. Got my PhD at UGA working on gopher tortoises, and spent some time stomping around with FWC in Florida. So I reside in Georgia, but I am familiar with Florida, and we're happy to be there and to help. Through Working Lands for Wildlife, we've been able to partner with Florida NRCS in putting a couple of partnership positions on the ground. These, we're calling them farm bill biologists. They are actually stationed in NRCS offices. So the idea is when we bring in these new programs, especially for something like, wildlife, we don't want to just drop plans on the desk and go. We actually want to help implement those plans. So they're fully engulfed in the planning process, actually entering things in the, computer. They mess around. They have full approvals, have an NRCS computer. So we're really trying to help with the planning process from start to finish, and offer really the technical assistance in the field, which, as all of you know, there's a lot of demand out there, and it's just hard to reach everyone. So we all have to partner up and get the job done, especially when we see more money coming down from national and they're expecting us to spend it, as we've heard echoed over and over in this meeting today. But, we want to be effective. We're not just shotgunning our funds out on the landscape. We want to make sure that we're putting high quality projects on the ground, and that's just where we need to kind of spread out our resources and all work together. So I'm excited to be introducing this in Florida. Nicole is our first biologist. She's just got hired on a couple months ago. So she's just starting. She's covering just a few counties around Brevard County. So a lot of counties that have actually been brought up. We are happy to help with some of your initiatives that you've talked about. We also are going to be reposting a job that for a Farm Bill biologist that will be stationed in Quincy, Florida. I know there were some questions about when that will be posted, and I'll be sure that that information is sent out to this group once we get that job posted. We also have Audrey Hawk in Thomasville. She is an education and outreach coordinator. So events, she pollinator projects, things like that. We are looking to partner in those, and again, help with some of those events. We're getting a lot of stuff on the ground between Learn and Burns, pollinator projects in other states. So we're looking forward to doing that here. And then, more for our fundraising. Quail Forever works a lot like, other organizations that you're familiar with, NWTF, organizations like that. So we do have the fundraising, we have the banquets, and Kenny Barker's our guy for that. So next slide, please. Like I've already kind of covered, there's a lot of words on here and I'm not going to read them all, but it's just to give you the idea is that our funding comes from national agreements, local agreements with state level NRCS. We work with Fish and Wildlife. We also work with state agencies as well, some RC&Ds. So we'll piece together funding for projects to provide technical assistance on the landscape. The majority of what we're doing right now in the Southeast is through the Working Lands for Wildlife framework. So that's pretty exciting. And I like it for the states because you're getting some free technical assistance from national, which is always nice. We're there to, like I said, not just work on, our focus right now is on bobwhite, northern bobwhite, because as it's been mentioned, they are a priority species for many states, but we also have hired wetlands biologists and other biologists, Kogan grass technicians, for example. So just let us know if we can help you out with anything. And reach out to Nicole. She's, like I said, she's new. She really wants to learn and shadow and help out in any way that she can. So next slide. And as you can see, I talked about us not wanting to really shotgun our approaches to this. So we are relying on focal areas that have been determined by usually the state agency, and also your local program staff have weighed in on where we know bobwhite are and where we have the best chance of conservation for bobwhite and other upland species. In addition to, if y'all are familiar with the way Gopher Tortoise Working Lands was rolled out, it's very similar. So we're basing it on ground truth data in most of the states. And you'll see here on the map on the left, it's based on a BRI rank, or a biologist ranking index, of where is the professional best estimate of where we should be placing resources. So if your county, if you're wondering, well, my county's not on the list, I know we have wild birds, go ahead and reach out to us and FWC and get those birds counted on the list. And you'll see on the right, that's kind of where this list has been coming from. is the BRI, in addition to some really cool projects FWC has been working on, citizen science, where people have been reporting in wild birds. That's really changed the way that we've approached some of the conservation areas for bobwhite in Florida. So a lot of really cool things going on. And like I said, feel free to reach out to us for help. And we're just happy to be involved and working with everybody. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I forgot about this slide. So this, if you take a photo of this, it'll send you to the Northern Bobwhite Grasslands and Savannas framework that was recently released, and kind of gives you a rundown of the goals, state goals, practices, etc. I'm actually at a bobwhite boot camp right now where we're training a number of biologists to help implement this program. And we're also able to do that locally as well. So reach out if you all need any local training, and we work with local partners. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate it.
Thank
Okay,
you.
with that, we will now move on to Chad Allison, who is actually here live and in person. He works with Partners for Fish and Wildlife, Coastal Program Coordinator, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to try to keep it on schedule. If I go quickly or gloss over anything, my contact information is at the last slide, and you can also Google the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program in Florida, find my contact information. So what you see on the screen there is a layout of where our coastal program and Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program staff are stationed across the state. Shouldn't be too far from anyone from the Panhandle to the Keys. My role is as the coordinator for both programs, and I also serve as the Farm Bill coordinator for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So what our programs do is provide technical and financial assistance to landowners. And when possible, we try to find the nexus with Farm Bill programs as well, and try to integrate them so that there's an efficient delivery of services to the customer. There are some differences, and they don't always align perfectly, but our job is to try and make that happen. And that's why I'm here today for the State Technical Committee. Next slide, please. I think when I presented about a year ago, I spoke briefly about the strategic plans and their current status. They were in development at the time. They were getting the final touches. They were actually approved earlier this year, both the Partners in January and then the Coastal Program in March. And what you see there are work areas where the biologists are assigned. We have 9 of us across the state, 4 Partners and 5 Coastal. And so we're stationed throughout work areas, and then we have focus areas, which are kind of the habitat types, the plant communities that we focus on. So you see some of the basic things that everyone's quite used to, upland pine and sandhill, scrub, dry prairie, the Florida Panhandle, et cetera. But there are some things that are, we're trying to build up a little bit more that have not historically been really emphasized. And so we're talking about river, stream, and riparian systems. We're talking about the Central Florida ridges to include the Lake Wells Ridge, as well as the Brooksville Ridge up into Citrus County. We're also talking about, for the coastal program, we're talking about things like, I think I can't see at the bottom of my screen, but the Pine Rocklands and Everglades systems, the Big Bend area where we have not historically had a huge presence, and of course the Indian River Lagoon with all the issues that are going on over there. Next slide, please. These are our program biologists that are stationed throughout the state. You don't have to remember this right now. You can reach out to me and I can certainly put you in contact with those individuals. As I mentioned, there's 9 of us. We're fully staffed as of January, which really helps get all of this work down on the ground. And I will mention that the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program areas are basically aligned with the NRCS areas. So there's some similarity, and try to keep it familiar for folks. Next slide. And just in terms of details about how these programs are offered to the state of Florida, both of them work with willing partners. We're doing technical and financial assistance. And I have to highlight this. We do emphasize listed species and at-risk species and those projects that contribute to their recovery or the preventing of further listings. The next bullet talks about an at-risk species finder, and I won't go through a demo right now. Some of you may have been on some recent meetings where we did, but I believe NRCS is going to include a link for this tool on the webpage. I submitted that to Nina, and basically it's pretty user-friendly, fairly intuitive, and it'll allow you to go through and see, listed species as well as those at risk, and trying to help customers identify projects that will contribute to the recovery and conservation of these species. Some key differences: Partnership Fish and Wildlife Program covers private lands, and that's defined as non-federal or state. And then the coastal program covers public and private lands. Partners projects have a minimum 10-year commitment, ensuring that the work is maintained. And then the coastal program also can help with third-party land acquisitions, not necessarily acquisition costs, but due diligence and things of that nature that support land protection. I will give I appreciate Jennifer Cotto-Salisbury acknowledging me earlier for the Landowner Assistance Expo. I was tracking that recently. It sounded like it was a huge success, and I think it probably even surpassed what happened a few years ago. And so it's great to see those programs, those outreach tools being used. And I encourage anyone across the state who's doing this type of work to kind of touch base with them on that model, because it's very effective. There's my contact information on the board. Can be reached pretty easily, and happy to answer any questions. Send over copies of that strategic plan, those strategic plans that haven't made it online yet, or anything of that nature. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. Okay, before we jump into the open general discussion and questions, we did have one more speaker. I did not have him on the PowerPoint, but Kevin Carter, Assistant Director with Broward County. Are you on?
I am. Hi, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Now, I'll be brief. I didn't have a PowerPoint. I'm actually here today on behalf of the Florida section of the American Waterworks Association. We represent over 2,800 members across the state that provide 80% of Florida's drinking water. As some of you know, AWWA's one of its biggest legislative priorities in 2018 was the source water protection provisions in the Farm Bill, the 2018 Farm Bill, which was projected to allow almost $4 billion to be spent for source water protection over 10 years. And so it remains an AWWA priority, to see those funds be spent across the nation and territories. In Florida, our first step was to reach out to Juan and Nina a couple of years ago. We've had some good meetings and interactions. This is my fourth technical meeting, and thank you for another great meeting today. Our next step is to educate our members more about the agricultural and forest communities. So we have set up a Water Utility Council Source Water Protection Committee. And what we're doing is bringing in experts from the agricultural and forestry fields to talk about their programs and see where we can start generating partnerships within those watersheds. To date, we've had Carol Estes with the Southwest Florida Water Management District Farms Program, and Kathy Halls, the coordinator for Southeastern Partnership for Water and Forest. So what I wanted to do today was to request, just saw numerous great presentations from the partners and NRCS today. Request speakers. We're going to try to meet monthly moving out towards the end of the year, and also participants in our meeting. We really see when we have somebody come in as a speaker, it's the start of a conversation that will lead, again, to being able to use these source water protection dollars in our great state. So that was the main thing I wanted to mention. We also, AWWA has started a tradition to celebrate source water protection by declaring Source Water Protection Week, the last week of September. And so we're looking for ideas from this forum to help us celebrate that. So that was the main thing. Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Juan, for an opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Right, very good. So with that, we now have come to the end of the presentations portion. We are also at 12 o'clock, but we want to give some time for anyone who has any questions or comments they wanted to make during the presentations, or they would like to make at this point?
Next meeting. We're pretty heavy schedule.
January. While Denise is looking that up, do we have anyone who has any questions or comments about any portion of our staff meeting?
I just wanted to add the local work group process that Kaylee explained. Something that it was not said is that all local work group meetings will take place during the fall. So that it will be in perpetuity, will be the intent is that it will happen the same time of the year. So that we're looking at a predictability so that people know when these meetings are going to take place. So that's what we're doing in October, November type setting timeline. And the same thing with the state technical committee that we want to do it twice a year on a fixed schedule. And that's what I wanted to add those two clarifications.
Then it won't be in January, Denise. We'll have to confirm that date because one is saying October, November.
No, that is a local work group.
Oh, local, okay, all
Yeah.
right. got it.
Yeah, typically, this one will be, I believe that is, how we have it is in January will be the next one.
January, yes, but I don't have the exact date in front of me and I don't see Onina's calendar either, so.
It's not on one's calendar either.
So we'll have to confirm, but in January, won't be the 1st of January, but probably second, third week of January, we will get that out to everybody. And like the local work group, the idea is for us to have our these stack meetings January and June of every year. Okay, so with that, actually, I'm going to turn the mic over to Juan Hernandez for closing remarks.
Well, thank you all once again. Very good meeting. It's noon already, so lunchtime. I don't want to really drag this much longer, but a great meeting, great input. At this point, we didn't have much of a discussion, but at least we wanted to give you a decent briefing of where we're going, what we have been doing, and where we're heading. So in essence, stay tuned. We will be continuing now that we have Cynthia on board. The website should become more reliable into what things are coming ahead and things that they will likely be of your interest. But with that, thank you for taking part of the meeting and looking forward to any future communications. Have a great day all. And thanks you guys for joining online as well. Thank you. Bye-bye. Some of the money to hire staff.